The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are.
We spend so much of our lives trying to become something, perhaps to become confident, smart, healed, fulfilled, happy. We chase clarity, purpose, achievement, and wholeness. We do all kinds of things to try and become. Go to therapy, read all the right books, build routines, fix habits, meditate, eat healthy. But isn't it strange that often that sense of arrival never quite appears? It's like we're doing everything right, but that feeling of actually having or actually becoming what we want stays just out of reach. Welcome to Mantis Library, where we examine the theories of great thinkers in order to succeed in the application of their ideas. Carl Jung gave us a roadmap in one of his major contributions to the field of psychotherapy, which he called individuation. He said, "I use the term individuation to denote the process by which a person becomes a psychological individual, that is, a separate, indivisible unity or whole. This is the path he offered to become your true individual self, beyond masks and conditioning." Individuation was basically Jung's version of the hero's journey. Jung's map includes different phases, steps, and alchemical processes, and it's a lifelong process of initiation into the totality of who you are. To understand what Jung actually gave us, the framework he built, we must understand that it's a map aimed at recollecting our fragmented parts. That means integrating all aspects of the self, both conscious and unconscious, light and dark, ego and shadow. Jung believed the psyche is driven towards unity and strives to bring all of its fragments into a cohesive self. At its core, the classic model of individuation involves several important parts. It begins by confronting the persona. This is, of course, our ego, the way we have decided we will present in the world. Then we have to confront the shadow, facing the rejected parts of the psyche that we've disowned or buried. Next is the integration of anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies that balance us from within. These steps, Jung believed, leads to an encounter with the self, capital S, which for him was the ultimate goal. The self with a capital S is the archetype of wholeness that serves as the guiding center of the psyche, as opposed to self with a small s, which is the ego's version of itself, the persona. And the process of individuation isn't a straight line. It's a process of working each of the parts over time, sometimes multiple phases at the same time, or a heavier focus on a particular part, just depending on the individual in question, what's going on in their life, and what their psyche is ready for in any given moment. It's a lifelong process of stripping away illusion and returning to what's real. Jung saw the psyche as an energetic system, not just a structure of thoughts or behaviors. Building on Freud's idea of libido, he redefined it as general psychic energy, the life force behind thoughts, emotions, desires, and instincts. He believed this energy moves through inner oppositions, conscious and unconscious, persona and shadow, activity and receptivity. Psychological growth, for Jung, was about the flow and transformation of this energy. He often used electrical metaphors, describing symbols and archetypes as transformers, conduits that channel psychic energy into conscious awareness. Psychic energy flows from tension, he wrote, just as electricity does from the difference in potential. When that flow is blocked, we see neurosis. But when the parts of the psyche begin to integrate, that trapped energy is released and becomes fuel for inner transformation. In Jung's later work, particularly in his alchemical studies and some of his more obscure letters, He hinted at something deeper, something that isn't talked about much in the mainstream psychological model. He referred to a mysterious force that could ignite transformation, not through thinking, not through analysis, but through direct experience. He called it a living substance. In his words, it is not just a symbol, it is a psychic reality, a ferment in the soul that changes everything it touches. Jung wrote, "The greater the tension, the greater the potential. Great energy only comes from a correspondingly great tension of opposites." It's a simple concept, really. Just think bow and arrow. The more tension you put on the string, the farther the arrow flies once released. In theory, this journey sounds beautiful, transformative even. But in practice, it's easy to get stuck. You read all the right books. You begin to recognize your projections. You nod at your dream journal filled with snakes, staircases, and forgotten lovers. And yet, nothing fundamentally changes. You keep looping. You're more aware, sure, but somehow still in the same emotional hole you were in 3 years ago, just with better vocabulary. The shadow work becomes endless, like peeling an onion that never ends. You confront your father wound, only to discover a mother wound, then a spiritual wound, then an early childhood wound. It's like trauma inception. There's also the danger of becoming obsessed with the archetypes' patterns themselves. You start seeing symbols in everything and interpreting them in some way. But the awareness of the symbolism can become the focus instead of the actual shift, because there is no application. Okay, so you've seen a symbol that keeps repeating, but what does it mean? What is it nudging you to do? And this opens the door to something Jung himself warned about: spiritual bypassing. Using growth as a way to avoid the raw, uncomfortable, practical work of change. We say we're integrating when really we're just intellectualizing. We say we're healing, but it's mostly performative. So why isn't the tension of opposites more widely recognized as one of Jung's key insights? In part, it was timing. Early 20th century psychology was already on the margins of science, and Jung had drawn criticism for referencing alchemy, myth, and astrology. To claim that inner conflict, what the alchemists called sacred tension, was not only real but necessary, would have pushed him further into territory the academic world scrutinized and rejected. Jung wanted psychology to be taken seriously, but he also understood that science alone couldn't fully grasp the psyche. Another reason this idea remained in the background is because it's difficult to teach. Psychic energy can't be reduced to a formula or forced into a step-by-step method. It isn't something you control. It happens in you and around you and for you. It breaks through in heartbreak, identity crisis, or moments that shatter the persona you've built. You can't manufacture it, but you can create the conditions for it. And that's where real individuation begins, not in theory, but in the charged intensity of lived experience. So how do you actually hold the tension of psychic energy, not as a theory, but as something you feel in your body? How do you learn to hold the charge, to stay present in the tension and let it work on you? Real transformation doesn't come from comfort. It comes from pressure, from the collision of opposites inside of you, until something new takes form. But it's not often someone teaches us how to be with tension and not do everything in our power to get rid of it. We want peace and comfort, but tension isn't really something we're accustomed to on a psychological level, not in the sense of allowing it to be there without trying to change it. Jung said, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain." What he meant was, the psyche doesn't grow when things are easy. And most of us are at war, quietly, not in some dramatic meltdown, but in the daily tug of war behind our eyes. I want to speak up versus I don't want to disappoint anyone. I need to be responsible versus I want to disappear into the woods and never come back. These are inner polarities, and most of us spend years trying to kill off one side so the other can be the only thing we feel. The other side wins and gets to stay, so to speak. But there's a catch. Individuation doesn't happen by picking a side. It happens when you hold both, in your life, in your body, and in your nervous system. You're not here to solve the conflict. You're here to learn how to hold both sides, passive and active, at the right time. How to work with conscious drive when it's needed. How to let shadow energy move through you when it's rising. How to use roles without becoming them or over-identifying with them. Strong, rational, put together. They can serve a purpose for sure, but when you cling to them and try to push away all other roles, they start running the show, and this traps you. Real power comes when you choose which part to lead with, based on what the moment actually calls for. So we can start there. We can acknowledge that we are not just one role, one way. Even that gives us some breathing room to acknowledge the other part, the part that does not want to be rational and put together. Jung also proposed that you have to learn to amplify the tension safely. He used a practice called active imagination to do this. You bring the conflict into form. Give each side a voice. Maybe it's the perfectionist in you, tight, polished, in control. And maybe it's the wild one, rage-filled, impulsive, done with holding back. You let them speak. You ask questions. Don't interrupt. Just listen. You're not trying to fix it. You're creating space for everyone's voice to be heard and everyone's perspective to be seen. You're essentially bringing these opposing self-parts into dialogue while you witness and keep record of what they say. Insight like this can be slippery, so when the perspectives come to you, record it. What did it feel like? What did those parts of you say? What's happening in your body as it comes up? The more you capture it, the more material you have to work with. Then take one small action. Speak a truth. Quit something that drains you. Choose differently. Jung said, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That charge. It only sticks if you move with it and take it from dialogue into action. So let's ground this with an example. Say you've always been the nice one, quiet, easy to like, but underneath, you're simmering. You resent how people lean on you. You bite your tongue. You feel hollow. That thing simmering below the surface creates the necessary tension. It's your ego wearing the nice mask while your shadow is getting sick of wearing it, getting tired of being quiet. The inner move then is, instead of trying harder to be nice, let the tension rise. Picture both parts and see the polarity. Let them have dialogue. Acknowledge the shadow part that is sick of being nice and quiet. Let the ego structure panic at the thought of not being nice. That tension is actually good. Don't try to fix it, just listen to each part. And through integrating what both parts want, a new version of you comes into consciousness. Perhaps you're still quite nice, but you end the niceties when your boundary is overstepped. Then something clicks. You realize kindness doesn't mean silence. You can speak with warmth and still hold your ground. You might disappoint someone, but you honor your own boundary, and you honor the parts of you that are holding those polarized feelings. When you start working with psychic tension in this way, things start breaking faster. Relationships shift. You stop forcing yourself into roles. The roles you do wear begin to soften on their own. The shadow stops feeling ignored. The critic loses its grip. You feel more whole, not because you fixed yourself, but because you're finally working with the tension that exists inside of you, instead of trying to rid yourself of it by making one of those perspectives shut up and go away. We're not romanticizing the process here, and Jung didn't either. He was very clear that too much psychic energy, too fast, can destabilize you. One moment you feel clear, the next you're spinning. Insights feel like enlightenment, but they can just be ego inflation, getting high off your own discoveries without integrating them. Jung called this over-identification and inflation. He said, inflation is a sudden expansion of the personality beyond its proper limits. Inner transformation, like physical transformation, when it happens over time, it's palatable and sustainable, even though it might cause discomfort. This is work you do over a lifetime, not overnight, and that's an important safeguard. After amplifying the tension, it's also important to ground the excess energy. Go slow, stay in your body. If things get shaky, return to the basics. Breath, food, movement, nature, connection. Talk to someone, journal. Go outside and take a walk. Working the process of individuation in its various steps is powerful and fragile. It needs safety, space, time. Once you learn to hold the tension of opposites inside, you'll see how the inner landscape is also reflected in the physical world. In alchemy, it's called conjunctio, the sacred union of opposites. That union only comes from the ability to hold the tension. No transformation will come from eliminating it. It comes from holding it consciously, knowing it exists, and knowing you cannot rid yourself, or the world for that matter, from it. This is precisely what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." What he means by this is that the unconscious shadow is literally our life energy that is shoved into our psychic basement. We have to go down to the basement and bring that energy up to the light, meaning up into our consciousness. I say that again to emphasize, we do this slowly, bits at a time, so that it doesn't disturb the psychic balance in such a way that we get pulled under into our own shadow for extended periods of time. That is dangerous and can be destructive. Jung saw this happening in his own time. He watched psychology drift toward cold analysis, forgetting the numinous, the sacred, and the soul. He said, "The great events of world history are, at bottom, profoundly unimportant. In the last analysis, the essential thing is the life of the individual. But when therapy becomes about symptom reduction and not becoming whole, shadow parts and all, we miss the very essence of what makes healing meaningful." It's not about fixing the psyche like a broken machine. It's about working with the psyche like a living, evolving system, one that thrives on paradox, mystery, and transformation. One that moves toward wholeness through the tension of the opposites inside of it and all around it. The tension is a bridge between psychology and lived experience, between theory and application. Jung said the self is both the center and the totality of the psyche. But without energy, without tension, pressure, release, you never begin to feel that totality. It remains just a theory. But when you learn to hold your internal opposition as living forces, you realize that the most charged moments, heartbreaks, ruptures, the choice that splits you in two, those are like an electric charge. And when you know how to work with them, the whole system opens and propels you towards what you want. Change begins to happen because you're finally aligned with the current underneath it all. So, if you enjoyed today's video, please let us know. We'll see you again in Mantis Library.